Welcome to the May 7th, 2020 full moon in Libra releasing practice. I am Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology, and I use Western Sidereal astrology in my practice to help you reconnect with your soul purpose and to really kind of remember why it is you came into this incarnation to begin with. I find that as we move through life, we tend to get kind of lost in the nitty-gritty details of living. And sometimes we get lost along the way, and then suddenly we find we're being called to do something different, but suddenly we don't know what that is. And so that's what I'd like to do, is help folks in that situation kind of really reconnect with what it is they're here to do. And my aim is really to provide guidance for you on how you can use the energy of the transiting planets kind of consciously, with intention, and respond to your transits rather than react to them, and basically to affect your life in a positive way with astrology. And so what I want to invite you to do is join me live for this full moon in Libra guided releasing practice. I'm going to guide you tonight through exploring how you can use this full moon to release imbalances that might be inhibiting your progress, how you can let go of other people's judgment and step out of fear of making a bad decision, analysis paralysis, right? The idea is so that you can finally make room for your own personal peace in your life and enjoy what is here for you. So grab a pen and paper, please. Grab your sidereal natal chart, or at least know your rising sign. And what we're going to do is use this full moon to let go of things that aren't serving us any longer. And so if you need to look up your sidereal sign placements, there's an easy and free online calculator at mystickphysic.com/sidereal tools, where you can find out for free. And thank you for joining me. So tonight we have the full moon in Libra. And what we'll do in the first part of the broadcast is we'll talk specifically about the astrology of that full moon in Libra. And then in the second part of the broadcast, we'll move into talking about what house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign, so that if you want to apply the full moon according to your natural houses and align it with your natal blueprint, you can do that. And then in the third part of the broadcast, what we'll do is we'll explore the archetype and themes of Libra in more depth. And then I'll share with you some prompts that you can use for consideration as you decide what it is that you want to let go of tonight with the full moon. The full moon releasing practices are really absolutely some of my favorite practices. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And I feel woefully underprepared. I don't have my fireproof bowl for doing my releasing. So maybe I'll just write out what it is I'm letting go of tonight and then do my burning afterwards. We'll see. Anyway, so welcome to the broadcast. Welcome to our May 7th full moon in Libra releasing practice that we're doing on May 6th. So Venus rules this particular full moon, and I want to talk about that because she is preparing to retrograde, and that's important to know. She's in a separating square from Neptune right now, and that is really an aspect that lends itself to disappointment and disillusionment within interpersonal relationships or in business or around money. And so what this means is that the outcome of this full moon could center around a disappointment or a disillusionment resulting from a prior deception. Okay? So keep that in mind as we navigate the new moon. There's potentially some not so fun stuff that we might be rolling through as we come through this particular full moon in Libra, due to that separating square from Neptune. So this has triggered something just a few days ago, and in the days leading up to the 3rd of May, I believe, is when that square to Neptune perfected. And so we may be seeing the aftermath of that right around the days of the full moon itself. This is a full moon that can really lend itself to escapism through indulgence, sensory stimulation, or pleasure seeking, possibly even through things like drugs or intoxicants. Those are ruled by Neptune. Okay. And so there's potentially an unhealthy thing going on in terms of our own need or desire or impulse to escape from reality, or just kind of get away from it all, or just like not wanting to deal with the details, right? Um, Relationship issues could come to the forefront with this full moon, partly due to the astrology of the full moon itself, partly due to the fact that Venus is screeching to a halt and preparing to retrograde in the coming week. So the Libra full moons typically are a good time to indulge in things that are Libra ruled: the arts, music, other entertainments, sensory stimulation. My dog's in my studio tonight. Hopefully you can't hear her trying to make the floor more comfortable to lay on. But usually Libra full moons are a time that we can indulge in our appreciation of those things. Typically they can be profitable for businesses and partnerships as well. However, there's a caveat to this tonight. And that is that Venus is, like I said, preparing to retrograde, and we want to factor that into what we decide to do with this full moon. And so Venus is in Taurus. Generally, that's a good thing. That's a sign that she rules. She's going to be in Taurus until August 2nd, and that is an extraordinarily long time for Venus to be in a given sign. She's usually only transiting a sign for about 3.5 weeks or so. But it's due to her retrograde that she'll be in Taurus for that long. Now, generally, she's strengthened while she's in Taurus because she rules the sign. Retrogrades, however, are a weakened state for a planet, right? We know that. And so retrograde Venus is not a good time for Venus-ruled activities, generally speaking. So things like art, antiques, jewelry, fashion, especially things like designer goods, you don't want to be spending money on those things right now as we move into Venus retrograde, because you're likely to be disappointed with your purchases or with the outcome of whatever it is. And so that is true, but there's a few other factors that we want to bring into consideration. There's an exception to that, and that is that bargain hunting for things like art, antiques, those sorts of things, Venus-ruled things, that can be fruitful. But it can be fruitful if and only if it's a purchase of something that you've had on your mind for some time. You've already been planning to make this purchase. It's not something that the impulse came during Venus retrograde, or the idea came during Venus retrograde. If it's a purchase that you've had on your mind for some time, during Venus retrograde, sometimes you have the opportunity to get a really good deal, because during Venus retrograde, what happens is that sometimes we're forced to let valuables go at a loss, usually either due to circumstances or due to the fact that we don't recognize the true value of what it is we've let go of. Okay. If you haven't had a purchase like that on your mind, or something that you've been planning on doing, don't go out and make one. But if you have been considering that type of a purchase or an investment in, a particular piece of art or something like that, and the opportunity comes during a Venus retrograde, you can take advantage of that. Like I said, if it's something that you've had planned. It's not a good time for things like cosmetic surgery, especially elective cosmetic surgery or changes to your appearance. Now, if you have to have cosmetic surgery or some sort of reconstructive surgery that might affect your appearance or your looks during Venus retrograde, by all means do it. If you have to do it and you don't really have an option, that's not what I'm saying at all. But if it's an elective thing, kick the can. Wait until Venus is direct again, because you're likely to be disappointed with the outcome. And especially if it's something surgical where it's going to be a permanent change to your appearance, it's not worth taking that risk. Same thing with finding a new stylist. Don't just go back and see the stylist that you've been using. Wait until after Venus is retrograde to find a new stylist. And don't make permanent changes to your appearance. Don't go getting some dramatic new hairstyle or try out some wild new hair color that you've never worn before. What happens during Venus retrograde is you end up disappointed with the outcomes of these things, and this has to do with your appearance, right? If it's something you're going to be wearing for a while, don't just wait. If you need to, get your hair trimmed or what have you, stick with styles that you've worn, tried and true styles that are flattering for you. Um, you can often also reconnect with past lovers during Venus retrograde, but it's not a good time to begin a new love affair during Venus retrograde, because people that you meet during this transit, you're not necessarily seeing their true relational colors, and you yourself might be viewing them through rose-colored glasses. So you won't really get a clear picture of the people that you meet during Venus retrograde until after Venus returns to direct motion. So it's not a good time to be entering into new relationships or making long-term commitments with someone who's just come into your life. Wait until after the retrograde is over. And I will also add that if your relationship has issues, expect them to surface during Venus retrograde, or resurface if they've been chronic issues. They can come right back up and rear their ugly heads. And so the real beneficial way to tap into Venus retrograde is to use it as a period of time for reassessing things, reevaluating things, right? Venus rules what's important to us. She rules our values, our priorities, what we find attractive, what's important, right? And so as we change, as we grow, as we move through life experiences, sometimes our values change as well. Sometimes our priorities change. Sometimes what's important shifts, and things that used to be important aren't as important any longer, and things that maybe never seemed important before suddenly really are, or we become aware of the fact that these things have become more important in our lives. And so use Venus retrograde as an opportunity for taking a good long look at your relationships, especially the most important relationships in your life. Can be a good time to take a look at your committed long-term relationships in love and in business, and see if they are still meeting the needs of all parties involved, or whether your needs could be better met elsewhere or in other ways. It's a good idea to reevaluate your priorities and your commitments. It's a good time to take a look at things that you own that are valuable, your possessions, your investments, what you're doing with your money, and see if it's still serving you in the way that it was. Sometimes you might realize that there are possessions that really just you don't need anymore. They've outlived their usefulness. Maybe you've changed, your life has changed, your needs are changed. You can use Venus retrograde to identify things that it's time to move out of your life. And then after, as Venus goes direct, feel free, start selling those things off or unloading them or what have you. It's a time to get clear on what your priorities are, so that as Venus goes direct going forward, you can be aligned better for that forward motion and for increasing the value in your life, increasing the beauty and appreciation in your life, and stepping into your long-term relationships, your committed relationships, your business relationships going forward with a new energy and a new sense of purpose and new sense of what it is you're wanting to achieve. Okay. However, all of that is strictly around Venus retrograde. And there's another Venusian issue going on right now that we need to factor into our plans for the full moon, and that is that Venus is out of bounds. She's been out of bounds since April 2nd, and she will be out of bounds until June 1st. Now, of course, she'll be retrograde until June 28th, I believe, is when she stations direct. So the out of bounds transit won't last through the entire retrograde, only through the first couple of weeks, the second half of May, basically. Now, Venus out of bounds, let's talk about this for a little bit, because this is a good third of her retrograde period that will feel this expression. So out of bounds planets march to the beat of their own drum. They kind of just do their own thing. They're very maverick. They don't play by the same rules as everyone else. They are very much outside of what's considered mainstream or the commonly accepted rules that we all live by, what's socially acceptable, right? The phrase beyond the pale is always what comes to mind when I think of out of balance planets. Now, that's not necessarily a negative thing, it's just a very extreme thing. But out of balance Venus can lend itself to a greater appreciation of unusual or eccentric or avant-garde art, fashion, jewelry, relationships, business opportunities, all that sort of stuff, basically. And so we're experiencing that right now, and we will for the first couple of weeks of Venus's retrograde. However, Venus's retrograde is not necessarily a good time for new stuff like that, right? So in terms of business, in terms of money, because Venus rules those things too, business direction can take a turn for the unusual and the creative, and out of the box thinking can be really profitable during Venus out of bounds. And so we have this window of opportunity, and it's going to continue to run for another 3 weeks or so, the first 2 weeks of Venus's retrograde, but 3 weeks from today, where tapping into that creative problem solving could be beneficial if you're a business owner, a business manager, or an entrepreneur. However, with the retrograde, which is May 13th through, June 26th is what I have here in my notes. She leaves her shadow July 28th. That's where I was getting the 28th from. So during this time from May 13th through June 26th, it's not a good time to start a new business or launch a new business venture. What you can do, though, this is kind of a little bit tricky. This is a super secret astrological trick I'm going to kind of toss your way, or an idea. Hopefully it plants an idea for you. You could use Venus out of bounds and the retrograde to shift gears with your business to respond to a temporary change or a temporary need and have that be profitable, and not necessarily be disappointed with the outcome of starting something during Venus retrograde. But it's something that you would do knowing full well as you go into it that it's a temporary thing for your business. You'll only be doing it for a limited period of time before you shift gears again and most likely go back to what you were doing or some variation of that going forward. So that is one interesting and unique way that you can use Venus's retrograde this time around and tap into that out of bounds energy. I think what we're experiencing on a global scale around COVID is a very good example of that, because here we are in a period where businesses all around the world are having to shift gears and adapt and change to a changing business environment. That's affecting everyone. It's affecting them. It's affecting their clientele. It's affecting lots of markets in lots of different ways. And so if you can find a way with your business to shift gears and adapt to COVID, to maintain your relevance, to maintain your profitability in the short term, knowing full well that down the road, as conditions shift again, you may be able to revert back, or at least somewhat revert back to what you had been doing. You could use these coming months in that way and still take advantage of some profitability in that way. But it's not a good time to start a whole brand new business venture. So if that was your plan, don't do it during the retrograde, because Venus rules business and money, and you're going to want Venus's full support behind any new business that you start. It's really, like I said, a better time to reevaluate things, your priorities, your values, your relationships, what your money is doing, what possessions you hold, that sort of thing. Take a closer look at that. Take a closer look at your commitments. Okay? Take a closer look at where you are involved in a symbiosis with someone else, and take a close look at, is it meeting both needs? Or is there something else that needs to be considered or brought into the equation, factored into the equation, or something that that you need to release and let go of, that as a relationship you've outgrown. Okay. So take a look at those things. Decide on what's really important for you and what isn't. Look for what it is you need to let go of or clear out that represents values that you don't hold any longer, things that aren't important to you any longer, valuables that you might be ready to cash in or sell off. Although I would wait until after the retrograde is over for the actual cashing or selling, generally speaking. Stock market wise, that might not be a good idea right now to kick the can. But who knows? It's tough to say. And if that were your question, if you were talking about investments in particular, I'd encourage you to talk to a financial astrologer who specializes in those things. And I want to invite you actually too, because of Venus retrograde and the fact that we're entering into the leading edge, we're already in it, like more than a month into it, the leading edge of eclipse season. You're going to want to watch my Eclipse Insights video that I just recorded. It's uploaded on YouTube. It's available on the website. But I talk about the upcoming June and July eclipse season that we're in. We have 3 eclipses in a row for that, and we are well underway and building steam and momentum to the very first of 3 eclipses we're going to be experiencing mid-year this year, the June 5th full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And so I want to invite you to check out that video. Haven't included a link in the video description, but I'll go back and add it after the broadcast is over. And I want to invite you to sign up for an Eclipse Insights reading. This is kind of a newish thing that we're testing out. You can reserve your spot or multiple spots if you have more than one eclipse you want to look at. There's a link in the video description. It's basically like a mini group reading where we're going to sit down and take a look at charts and how these eclipses, if any of them that might be affecting you, you can book a 30-minute slot to have us take a closer look at how the eclipses might be affecting you and what you might need to know to navigate them, depending on how they interact with your own natal blueprint. And so you can book those right now. I'm only taking 4 seats per session, so there's only 12 slots, and some of them are booked already, but I want to invite you to book a slot. Our first session is tomorrow, so if you want a morning session, get in right now. But you'll have a chance to have me look at your chart in connection with the upcoming eclipses, whichever one of them is affecting you, or if there's multiple ones affecting you, book multiple seats. But watch the 2020 June and July eclipse season video first, because I walk you through how to see if you're going to be affected by any of them to begin with. So watch that video. And if there's one or more eclipses, book one or more spots, and we can talk more in depth on your particular situation. And what we'll do is, these are kind of like 2-hour increments where we'll have about 4 people per seat, and we'll spend 20 to 30 minutes on each person's chart. And so what that'll do is give you the opportunity to have kind of like personalized insight from a professional astrologer into what you can expect in the coming months. Eclipse season lasts until early September, and we're going to feel the effects of these eclipses for 12 months after they happen. And so it'll give you that opportunity to have that interaction and ask questions directly from an astrologer, and then also an opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about astrology, if that's really your gig, through observing each participant's case study in your mini group reading session. And we're going to do 3 different meetups, morning, afternoon, and evening, and that way there's time slots no matter what your schedule is or no matter where you are in the world. Hopefully there's a time slot that will work for you. But really it's just meant to give you a way that you can get personalized insight into how an eclipse might affect you as we move into this eclipse season. And it's a chance to work directly with me as your personal astrologer in a way that helps you just get more insight. And so book one at the link if you'd like to join me for that. I think it's going to be fun. I'm kind of excited about this. And let's dive into what house this is falling into for each of you according to your sidereal rising sign, right? So if you have Aries rising, this will be a 7th house full moon for you. Partnership and marriage, business, those sorts of things. 7th house is, of course, the natural house for Libra, and Aries being the first house, it falls in line with the natural zodiac. Keep in mind, though, that the 7th house is also the house of open enemies and rivals. Okay, and so in that sense, a lot of what we've been talking about today with the way that the full moon could unfold for you and Venus's retrograde and out of bounds behavior. If you have Aries rising, you might be feeling this experience around rivalry. Okay, so not necessarily about a love relationship, but it could be something around a relationship you have with a rival. Okay, and also when it comes to the seventh house, we get to talk about the descendant. That's the point exactly opposite the ascendant, right? And so this is a point that speaks specifically to our partner, but it also talks about what we tend to reject about ourselves and then project onto other people around us. And so if you want to do some shadow work, seventh house is a particularly good opportunity for doing some shadow work. And there may be something there that if you have Aries rising, you realize it's time to kind of let go of maybe a behavior or a judgment or something like that that you maybe come to realize is related to some sort of shadow nature or shadow work of your own that you're doing internally. Okay. Taurus rising, this is a sixth house full moon for you. So that has to do with work, health, pets, daily routines. It has to do with employees if you have them. It has to do with your habits and your schedules and also your diet. And so full moons are a fantastic time in the sixth house for letting go of bad habits and for letting go of, say, if you want to make dietary changes, of phasing out unhealthy foods and things for you. Not necessarily for adopting new healthy things, but for letting go of unhealthy bad things. Use the full moon in your sixth house for that. If you have Gemini rising, this of course is a fifth house full moon for you. So that has to do with love. It has to do with creativity. It has to do with romance. If you have Gemini rising, this would be a great time to finish up a creative project. You could do that with the fifth house full moon, especially if it's one that you've been sitting on and left unfinished for a while. You could do that. Fifth house has to do with children, like we said, romance and true love, but not long-term committed partnerships, right? Venus's domain is Libra, that's seventh house. Fifth house is Leo and the heart. So it has to do with pleasurable activities, things that bring us happiness, things that bring us joy and pleasure, sports, risk-taking and gambling, those sorts of things, hobbies, all that stuff, creativity and artistic expression, you could say, is also a fifth house endeavor. Cancer, fourth house, home and family, property, parents, could be one or both. The fourth house also rules later life. Okay, so that's what's going to be active for you if you have Cancer rising. And of course, Cancer, fourth house is, like that's your home, right? Leo, third house full moon, travel and communication, travel over short distances, mind you, your neighborhood, your community, nearby, and not long distance communication, but communication within your immediate locale. Also rules the mind and communication and writing. Also rules siblings, neighbors, extended family, things like aunts, uncles, cousins. Those are third house related. And then your immediate environment, your surroundings and where you find yourself. That's also ruled by the third house. Virgo, second house, full moon. So earned income and expenses. And let's talk about this. When there's a full moon in the second house, often what it means that a source of income may be coming to an end. Now, it can play out differently if you made an initiation at the new moon in your second house. If you took steps to increase or add to your income, what you can see at the full moon 6 months later is those efforts begin to pay off. However, if you did not take those steps, there is potentially a chance, depending on how a full moon interacts with your chart, that you may lose a source of income at the full moon in your second house. The second house is related to wealth and possessions, expenses, movable assets, money that you earn from the work that you do in the world, from your day job, right? From the way that you serve others. It has to do with your expenses as well. So oftentimes You might have an expense come up, or you may have to lay out cash for an expense during a full moon in your second house. If this is Libra rising, it's a first house full moon for you. Appearance, self-expression, right? The first house is related to our personality, our mannerisms, our behavior, how we interact with the world around us, the role that we play in the world, our physical body, our appearance, the way we look, our self-expression, right? So this is a full moon in your first house, and you may see that a role that you have been serving in is coming to an end in some way, or some part of your identity is no longer relevant or related because you've grown as a person, and so you might move away from something that used to be a really strong part of your identity. Those things can happen during the full moons in the first house. Scorpio, this is a 12th house full moon for you. So that has to do with privacy and seclusion, right? It has to do with solo projects and things that you work on out of the public eye, kind of behind closed doors. 12th house also has to do with spirituality. Has to do with the unconscious mind and our escapist tendencies and addictions. And so for Scorpio, where this is a 12th house full moon and we already have these concerns around disappointment and disillusionment and escapism through potentially, through things like drugs or alcohol. If that's something that you find that you're prone to, just be extra vigilant. And if you need to call in backup to to help you maintain an even keel through the full moon in terms of like your emotional response to it and how, what impulses you follow in that regard, because of course full moons can make us all impulsive. We all know that. Know that if you need to do that, do that. Right? These are not particularly helpful circumstances at this full moon. They are actually quite challenging for some people. And so if you need extra support and you have ways that you tap into getting that support, just know that you may need to do that at this full moon. And, if there's someone you need to have on speed dial, keep them handy just in case. Sagittarius, this is an 11th house full moon for you. So that has to do with friends, organizations, hopes and dreams, that sort of thing. So if there's a hope or dream that you've had for a long time that you've been working on manifesting or bringing to fruition, please use this full moon to put the finishing touches on what you've been working on. It's a great time to do that. For Capricorn, this will be 10th house. So that's career and achievement, awards, recognition, fame, things like that, right? Status and reputation. So if you've had a project that you've been working on for some time, if you've got Capricorn sun, Capricorn rising, this could be a full moon where you finally see recognition for that, or where you kind of see the payoff come for your efforts. Okay. For Aquarius, 9th house, that has to do with long distance travel. It has to do with long distance communication. So things like publishing and broadcasting, international travel, immigration, also has to do with legal and higher education matters. And then the 9th house also rules religion, philosophy, law. If you've had a legal matter that you've been working on, you might see that kind of come to a head or reach a conclusion in the courts with the Libra full moon. Okay. For Aquarius, this is a 9th house full moon. Wait a minute, we just talked about that. For Pisces, this is an 8th house full moon. Other people's money. So the resources that come to you through your partner, that's 8th house. Investment earnings, insurance, taxes, inheritance, those sorts of things. Bonus and commission income is ruled by the 8th house, as are more esoteric types of things like death, rebirth, transformation. The 8th house also has to do with psychology and healing and investigation and deep analysis and digging. So you may see that there's something along those lines that's in the process of wrapping up or finishing up, or that you're needing to wrap up or finish up around this full moon in that regard. Okay. So if there are any questions around that, please let me know in the comments. I'm going to check into the chat boxes real quick. Let's talk a bit about the Libra archetype and Libra themes. So Libra, of course, is represented by the scales, right? This is an archetype of balance, of equilibrium. It's an archetype of harmony, a natural harmony, right? The natural world generally exists in a state of equilibrium. That's how it functions best. Libra as an archetype recognizes, or at least, what's the word I want? Acknowledges that everything that exists along a continuum, and that you can't pick up one end of the stick without picking up the other, right? I can pick up this end of the stick, right? So everything is polarity, everything is duality, yin and yang, and each half is what gives meaning to the other, right? You can't remove part without affecting all of it, without affecting the whole, right? If you take away evil, good loses its meaning, right? So this is the concept of Libra. Libra is also about commitment, especially to a partner or other, because it's 7th house, and 7th house is other, not us. It's the opposite of us. And so during a Libra full moon, especially one like this, it can be a good time to take a look at, where are you avoiding commitment? Is there some place in your life where you're afraid of making a wrong choice? Is there some place in your life where you're suffering from paralysis by analysis, or repeatedly playing devil's advocate? Okay, playing devil's advocate is not necessarily always a healthy or good or helpful thing to do. And if you're playing devil's advocate, I would say often this can be related to a fear of making a wrong decision, right? Especially this analysis paralysis. And so with the full moon here, what we have is an opportunity for you to release your fear. Okay? What's keeping you from balance? What's keeping you from harmony in the part of your life that's ruled by Libra? What could you let go of or release that would allow you to find balance or peace in that part of your life? Ask yourself, are you being superficial or overly concerned with appearances? And is that an attachment that you can let go of? Can you let go of what other people think about you regarding whatever it is? It's none of their business. It's none of your business what other people think of you anyway, right? It's their business, not yours. And so I would invite you to consider, can you become, in the words of Stephen Forrest, bothered by nothing, offended by nothing, and shocked by nothing? That would be one thing I would challenge you to do during this Libra full moon. Is that something that you can step into and embrace and embody? So whatever it is, I want you to take a moment and write it down on your paper. I want you to spend a moment, whatever it is that you are letting go of or releasing from your life, whatever it is you're ready to move beyond, whatever is no longer providing value in your life, write it down on a piece of paper and spend a moment to thank it, because whatever it was, while it was in your life, it provided a lesson. It did bring you some kind of value, even though that value may no longer be as, I don't want to say apparent isn't the word, relevant to where you are in your life right now. But write it down on a piece of paper and spend a moment to thank it, whatever it was, for that lesson and the value that it brought you while it was in your life. And state aloud after you're done writing this to the universe or God or whatever it is that you connect with, your intention to release it from your life and from your experience. Just state aloud, I release this, whatever it is that no longer serves me, and I release it with love. Okay, so what we're going to do is spend a few moments. Where did I was just preparing myself with a stash of paper. Oh, look, I put them right here, specifically for my full moon releasing practices, so that I would have them handy. And I'm not going to burn this on the live stream tonight. Normally what I would have you do is when you're done writing out what it is you're releasing, state it out loud, that you're releasing it with that statement of gratitude, and then you would burn it or tear it up into tiny little pieces. Okay, and what we're going to do is get started with our writing. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I can recap these real quick for anyone who might be joining us late on the live stream. Where are you avoiding commitment? Where are you afraid of making a wrong choice or suffering from paralysis by analysis? Where do you repeatedly play devil's advocate, or have a fear that you need to release around making a wrong decision? What's keeping you from balance and harmony in your Libra house, in that part of your life? What can you let go of or release that would allow you to find that balance or find that peace? Or if there's something that you need to bring into your life, which is what we do at the new moon, at the full moon, we make space for that thing that needs to come into our life. And so if there's something that you need to invite into your life that you're lacking, have a look at what it is what's in your life now that you need to release to make space for this thing that you want to invite in. Okay? Are you being superficial or overly concerned with appearances? Can you let go of attachments to what other people think? Can you become bothered by nothing, offended by nothing, and shocked by nothing? In the words of Stephen Forrest. Okay. Take a moment, jump in, and write it down what it is you want to let go of for the full moon. If anyone needs more time, let me know in the comments. Oh, wow. Sorry about that. Okay. I generally don't plan what I'm going to release or initiate for a lunar live stream before we come on and do this live. And if it's all right with y'all, I can't share this one with you. I apologize. It's too big. It's very personal. Unexpected. Thank you. If anyone is watching the replay or on live and would like to share in the comments what you're letting go of tonight, if you're comfortable with that, I invite you to do that. Y'all know I always share, and I apologize that I won't be doing that this time. I wasn't expecting this topic to arise for me, and it's very personal. Thank you so much for joining me on this live stream for our releasing practice. And if you're catching the replay, feel free to share your comments, your questions, your observations in the comments below the video. I love your comments. I love coming back to answer your questions. And I find when we do these practices, especially the initiations and the releasings, excuse me, I need a Kleenex. What I find is that when we can share them, they can actually be quite helpful to the other folks who watch the broadcast or who are following along on the video, to hear what other people are, or how other people are using the lunation energy. It can be very insightful. It can often be very inspiring. And so if you're willing to share, I invite you to share that in the comments. Thank you so much if you're able to do that. It's usually it's always nice. I don't know. There's something special about it. I don't know. There's not a word that I can put to it right now. Maybe it's because I'm kind of wound a little bit just from being blindsided by this releasing practice. And I'm not going to burn mine live on the broadcast tonight. I normally do that, but I don't have my bowl with me that I normally burn with. And so I apologize. I'll burn mine afterwards. If you are burning your releasing, once you've stated aloud with your gratitude and let it go, burn it in a fire safe place. Okay, if you're going to burn it, be safe about it. Also, if you're going to burn it, make sure it burns completely. So if there's a piece of your paper that hasn't quite gone up in flames, make sure that you get it all completely burnt up. Alternately, you can just tear it up into tiny little pieces and just let it go that way. That also works as well. Thank you so much for joining me. Please, I invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I would definitely encourage you to click on the notification bell icon, because I am not always really good about letting you all know with the reminder emails ahead of when our lunations are going to take place. It's always the day before the new moon or the full moon. So if you wanted to put it in your calendar, you could do that. I try to send out a reminder email that we're going to have a live for the lunations, and reminder emails for the Sidereal Insights Astro updates that happen every 2 weeks. I'm not always good about getting them out, so you might want to get the notifications. And I invite you to, like, if you know someone that might benefit from doing this practice that we're working through tonight, feel free, share this with them, and you can tag them or invite them to come watch it as well. And I want to thank you all so much for joining me, and I want to remind you, be sure to watch the June and July 2020 eclipse season critical dates and degrees to know video that I just released. because we are rushing headlong into eclipse season, and you're going to want to know how there's 3 this time around. Full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio, a new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, and a full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. And so you're going to want to know whether or not any of those eclipses affect you, and that video will walk you through how to know. I give you all the important degrees that you want to check in your chart. I go through whether any of those eclipses are going to be challenging or easy for you according to how they interact with your rising sign, or you can look at these with your sun sign as well. And then I also give you a breakdown on the dates that you want to pay attention to just in eclipse season proper, which lasts from early April until early September. And then I give you the dates that you want to have at your eye on for the coming 12 months ahead, because eclipses can have an effect for an entire year. And so there's a lot of meat in that broadcast. It runs a little bit longer than our normal eclipse broadcasts because we're talking about 3 eclipses this time instead of the normal 2. And then what's also different about this video is that I go into specifics about the astrology of each of those eclipses as well. I don't often, or I haven't in the past done that on the eclipse videos, but this time around I would give you a breakdown of what you can expect from each of those eclipses, how they might play out, how you can use them. And then of course I want to invite you, if you want to have a little more detailed look about how the astrology of those eclipses interacts with your own personal chart and how it might affect you directly, book an Eclipse Insights mini group reading with me. Those are getting underway starting tomorrow. I'm doing 3 sessions, and I'm happy to have you, or help you, take a closer look at how you might be able to navigate the coming eclipse season yourself. Thank you all so much for joining me, and we'll see you again next time.